used to be so offended by George W. Bush's war on terror because it was obviously just imperialism, nationalism, USA exceptionalism, or whatever you want to call it, white supremacy. It was obviously just an excuse for white supremacy to call these people terrorists and those people terrorists. But the common theme was you had to try to label certain groups of people terrorists, or at least pretend or make up some type of terrorist organization in a country in order to invade it or whatever, to excuse doing whatever you wanted to do. And what's supremely ironic, or not so much ironic, is it shows how these things work. When you lie about something so much, and George W. Bush was lying about his war in Afghanistan and lying about his war in Iraq and lying about his war on terror altogether, because it wasn't really a war on terror. It was using terror as an excuse, as a label for a war on brown people, for a war for white supremacy. But now it's come home to roost. Trumputineers are the white supremacists. Trumputineers are the terrorists. We have one terrorist network in the world right now that is just completely unchecked by any power whatsoever, including our media. Our media just refuses to call any of the numerous Trumputineer MAGA terrorists terrorists. Just won't call them terrorists. But if we just return to a war on terror mentality, but actually identified where the real terror is coming from, Putin and Trump and their Trumputineer terrorists, and we had a war on those terrorists, we'd win, for one. We would actually stop terror because we would be actually targeting the terrorist ideal, the ideals of being a terrorist, not just the ideals of certain colors of people who want to do something and calling them terrorists. Or as Ronald Reagan said about Osama bin Laden, one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter, because Osama bin Laden was Reagan's freedom fighter and then became Bush's terrorist. But just like Hamas for Netanyahu, if Netanyahu funded Hamas and coordinated the October 7th attack, then Hamas are his terrorists. And people run terrorists, just like the Azov or Avaz, whatever battalion that so many Trumputineers made hay about in Ukraine, that Putin probably put there. Putin probably fostered a neo-Nazi battalion within Ukraine for an excuse, because Putin is obviously a Nazi. Just like Trump and Netanyahu and Modi and all his puppets are obviously Nazis. And just like Jesus said, you can judge a tree by its fruit. Putin's the trunk of Nazism right now. And Netanyahu, Trump, Modi, Bolsonaro, Orban are all Musk, Zuckerberg, what's his name? Tim Cook from Apple. They're all the fruits of Nazism. They're all the Nazis on Putin's Nazi tree. So we should chop the whole damn thing down. We can stop these countries from being countries. We can set a new standard that if a country descends into fascism, such as America, Israel, and Russia just did, they don't get to be countries anymore. Just break them up. Return the land to the indigenous people. And let them make whatever form of country, or whatever countries, whatever political units and boundaries they decide on. We could have a whole new thing beyond post-country world, pioneered by the indigenous people getting their land back and not making the same thing that we call a country. But all that's in the future. Right now, let's deal with the present and let's end these fascist countries. It's terror. This is a terrorist network, and all the gumption and muster we got for stopping terrorism back in the 90s, supposedly, that we turned our whole country to stop terrorism. Let's just stop the terrorism that has infected our country all the way up to the White House. Trump is a terrorist. All his supporters are terrorists, and they keep terrorizing us. And all the media type that keeps covering it up or refusing to call it terrorism are also terrorists. We can start at the top. We don't need to round up every single one of them, whoever gave a false report or ever advertised Trump's concentration camps by saying they would be good for local economies, like they did at Colorado Public Radio here. That's Nazi. That should earn you a place on a list to be hunted for the rest of your life, to have your citizenship revoked, to be deported, to give your house to an immigrant. But it's not an honest mistake. It's sucking up to Trump, which is a mistake no one should ever make. But it's not as bad as the ICE agents running around kidnapping people. It's not as bad as Trump himself and Stephen Miller and telling people to kidnap people, orchestrating the kidnappings in the concentration camps. It's not as bad as Alito and Thomas and other Putin-captured Supreme Court justices, voting for that or siding with that. But Alito and Thomas and Trump and Stephen Miller should be the first ones to lose their citizenship and lose their houses and lose their RVs and be deported to Siberia, and to have those houses and RVs given to immigrants. Because immigrants are far more American than Trumputineer terrorists have ever been. And these Trumputineer terrorists who have been in America have betrayed America knowing what America is. And they've betrayed America with terrorism knowing what America is. People who just have a dream about America, who've never been here before, are more American than they are because they didn't betray this country in what we are. So let's call these terrorists out for what they are, terrorists. Let's approach them with as much enthusiasm as we mustered to oppose terrorists under the Bush administration. But let's oppose these terrorists to the end, and let's stop their terrorist network from ever doing anything else again. Thank you.